The Washington Commanders should be bringing in competition for Sam Howell next season, but how and where they get that competition is going to be very important. That and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into this episode of Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thanks so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you're getting this podcast. And you can continue this conversation with me by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Commanders to sign up today. And from there, you will get news, insights, discussion, analysis, bonus content, all delivered straight to your phone via text message. No searching, no hashtags, no threads, no apps. It all goes straight to your phone. You text me and I get it straight from you. Go to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Commanders today to become a Lock Insider. I'm David Harrison, credential member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for CommanderCountry.com, a part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation. And I'm here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers. And as always, I greatly appreciate your continued support for the show. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. On today's episode of Locked On Commanders, we're redrafting 2023, and we're talking about a myriad of things, including coaching searches and who to keep on the offensive line. But first, the whole thing circles around the quarterback position, right? And to me, competition is always a good thing, especially if you don't have a true blue franchise quarterback in the building. But you have to be careful on where you invest to bring in that competition next season to make sure that you're bringing in competition, but not fighting against yourself. And that's how we're going to kick off today's mailbag episode with Robert writing in. I was thinking, Dave, that we are in the same situation as 2020. We had a new regime coming in with Haskins, God rest his soul, as our number one quarterback. Now, 4 years later, we're in the same boat. New regime. Howell is our number one quarterback. We did not draft a quarterback to compete with Haskins, which we probably should have. We could draft someone like Cam Ward, who I think could be a steal, or go get a Bo Nix or McCarthy. You can even wait later in the draft and give Van Dyke or Hartman. This is a great year for quarterback. We should draft one and let Howell and him compete for a starting job in training camp. All right, great stuff from Robert there. Insider Robert, appreciate you coming through with that. Two schools of thought on this whole topic for me here. For position competitions, I kind of always like to have one young dude and one old dude. I like to have a veteran and a younger. And I say old dude, I don't mean like old, but older at least, because you get the advantage of youthful energy and moldability, coachability, all those things versus veteran experience. Typically more consistency in what you can expect from them, but in a lot of ways, they're kind of stuck in their ways. They kind of are who they are, and their habits have kind of been solidified, right? So you get a little bit of each flavor, and I think it just kind of gives you a better probability of finding an effective match for your offense, for your team, for your locker room, all of that. Now, Sam is obviously still young. So for me, I would rather go the veteran route to bring in a potential competitor, but you also want a competitor who is someone who can be your future, at least for a good solid while, right? That's why Jacoby Brissett really doesn't make a whole lot of sense outside of the short term, because he is an older quarterback. You're not sure how much more you're going to get out of him before he really starts to kind of decline in his play and his athleticism. And then, of course, one injury, the older you are, the more nicks and bumps and bruises you take, the harder it is to come back from there. So there's an age cap for me. And for me, that age cap is around 28 years old. You might be able to go 29, depending on the candidate, but ideally you want to look at about 28 years old. So looking at the free agent market next year, the top three options that fit that mold for me would be Seattle Seahawks quarterback Drew Lock, who turns 28 in November of 2024, Indianapolis Colts quarterback Gardner Minshew, who turns 28 in May of 2024, and Cincinnati Bengals quarterback Jake Browning, who turns 28 in April of 2024. So all three of those guys are turning 28 this next offseason, or for Drew Lock in the midst of next season. And they all have, varying levels of experience. I think Gardner Minshew, off the top of my head, probably has the most games played. I know Drew Lock started for a while for the Denver Broncos, but Gardner Minshew, between, his stops in the NFL, he's kind of been around. He's kind of a go with the flow type of guy. He's a guy who knows that he may come into a position as a backup, but if he becomes a starter, he's ready to become the starter. The Indianapolis Colts have really benefited from him coming in, being the backup to Anthony Richardson. But when A-Rod got injured, Gardner was able to come in, and, it's not this contentious quarterback situation where you've got the backup kind of hoping for the starter's downfall and all these things. But this guy is youthful enough. He's energetic enough. He's experienced enough that you can kind of trust him to go out there and do some things. You don't need to completely shrink into your offense. So I really like an option like Gardner Minshew. Drew Lock is a guy that I kind of feel like got washed up in some tumultuous coaching situations with the Denver Broncos during his time. I feel like his potential was never truly tapped into, but he's really been able to kind of stabilize who he is and what his career is with the Seattle Seahawks. And of course, you see him this last week go out there, have a pretty solid game against Philadelphia Eagles. One game doesn't, make a whole lot of evaluation possibilities, you know what I mean? But when you look at a guy who, again, he's been a backup, he's done it with class, he's done it with professionalism. He's not a problem. I mean, you see Geno Smith, if you watch that Eagles game, when Drew Lock throws what ends up being the game-winning touchdown, Geno Smith is on the sideline doing his kind of suit and tie celebration with him. So, I mean, obviously your starting quarterback really enjoys having Drew in that room. There's a good relationship there, and that's ultimately what you want, is be competitors, but also be brothers on the same team. Jake Browning, a little bit less experienced, but he's obviously been able to do some good things with the Cincinnati Bengals, getting his first shot in the NFL of regular season play time. He's been around for a little while, so that's always good. You want to lean on some of that experience. So for me, when you're talking about bringing in a potential veteran quarterback to be that competition for Sam Howell, those are the three guys I'm looking at in that order: Drew Lock, Gardner Minshew, and Jake Browning. Because again, if any of those three guys comes in and wins the job over Sam, truthfully just wins the job, then you've got in theory at least a better quarterback situation. But if any of those guys are relegated to backup duty, then they're familiar with that role and they accept that role and they're good in that role as well. And then Sam, he's been a backup before. It'd be his first time going back to being a backup. So, you can't really fully predict what that would be, but given Sam's personality, given his ability to kind of compartmentalize, control what you can control, focus on everything else, you have to believe that he would at least be a good teammate in the room. Obviously wouldn't be happy with the situation, but would at least be a good teammate in the room. And, if you got any quarterback out there, and this will go for Sam, let's go for anybody else. If you got a quarterback in your room that is afraid of competition, then, I think you have a pretty big problem in your quarterback room. Now, looking at the draft, and that's where Robert brought up some names. Bo Nix is projected right now by PFF to be a first-round pick, around the 19th overall pick. To me, that's too rich. You draft a quarterback, first-round, 19th overall pick. That's not a competition. That dude is your eventual starter. Like, it's just a matter of when, not if. So that doesn't obviously meet our competition standard. JJ McCarthy, second round, 58th pick. Not quite an automatic starter and all those things. I look back at, Kyle Trask from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers was a second round pick, is yet to start a regular season NFL game. But I do think that, a second round pick, the second that Sam has a bad game or struggles, you're going to start hearing calls for JJ McCarthy or whoever that quarterback is to start coming in. And again, it's less of a true competition and more of a, okay, when is the first shoe going to drop so that people can start calling for this dude to come in before the second shoe drops. Tyler Van Dyke is a good option, but he's actually staying in school. That's recent news. He's transferring to Wisconsin. So just updating everybody on that. So certainly a dude to watch for the future, potentially, if Sam gets the starting job 2024. And, depending on how things go there, Tyler Van Dyke may be an option that you're looking for in 2025. Now, I'm not against getting a developmental quarterback as well, right? A young guy to bring in the room but when you've already got a developmental quarterback like Sam Howell is, because again, any quarterback in their first, second year, third year, even in the NFL, but first, second year as a starter, certainly a developmental guy. Like, none of those guys are done cooking in year two. It's just not how this works. So to me, if you're going to bring in another developmental guy, you need to do it in the light that you're not going to also have pressure to start that guy. Now, what Brock Purdy has done is pretty much put any quarterback on any roster in the seat where they could be called for by a fan base or a media circle. So, but traditionally you want to do that in the 6th or 7th round because you want your first 5 rounds worth of picks to be guys who are going to contribute somewhat immediately, even if it's on special teams, or provide critical depth for critical positions like offensive line and stuff like that. Now, when you're looking at the 6th or the 7th round right now in the NFL draft, and again, this is all going to change as we get through the process further. But as of right now, when you're looking 6th or 7th round, you're looking at guys like quarterback Sam Hartman, who Robert mentioned, out of Notre Dame, Cam Ward out of Washington State, again, who Robert mentioned, but then also a guy like Devin Leary out of Kentucky. So those are 3 guys you could be looking at. For me, I would put them in that order: Hartman, Ward, and then Leary, if those are your 3 options. So all of that being said, the time to compete for a starting quarterback job to me is in training camp. Once the season starts, you name your starter, you roll with your starter, because To me, the quarterback position is far too mental of a position for a guy to be looking over his shoulder every single snap, wondering if that snap is going to get him benched. I've seen NFL teams do that too many times, and it hardly ever, if ever, works out well for the quarterback or for the team. So competition is always good, but you do need to be careful where you invest in to get that competition. For me, if I'm the Commanders, I'm going after a veteran free agent. I'm going to bring him in to compete with Sam Howell, and then I'm going to go probably 6th or 7th round, bringing another quarterback to develop along the back end. And then, me personally, just because I know him, but obviously the new coach and GM may not, I'm bringing back Jake Fromm if I can, to keep him around my locker room and keep him around my young quarterbacks as well. We talked about some players we want to see more of on the offense these next 3 games this week, and we're going to expand that list now. Coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest and the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling guys like me and everybody else, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and then just sit back and watch your winnings roll in. PrizePicks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. In fact, I already got my submission in for Thursday Night Football. And on Thursday night, I'm rolling with Saints running back Alvin Kamara to get more than half a touchdown. Rams running back Kyron Williams to get more than 109.5 rushing and receiving yards combined. And Rams kicker Lucas Havrasek to have more than 7 points kicking. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100, and then make your own picks or copy mine. I've been doing all right this year. Not perfect, but pretty solid. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first to listen, your first view today and every day. Every dayers come back tomorrow. We got Crossover Thursday coming up. Locked On Jets coming through for that episode. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Continuing on with our mailbag episode, Michael came through and said he wants me to expand on my offensive players that I want to see more snaps from as we get towards the end of the season. I mentioned a guy like Chris Rodriguez, 6th-round draft pick, running back rookie this season. I want to see him get more reps, especially if Brian Robinson is unable to go against the New York Jets. Certainly want to see him get more involved. But Michael wants me to name more, and then he also wants me to name some offensive linemen that I want this team to keep and to replace this coming offseason. So some offensive players I want to see more of. Chris Rodriguez, like I said, is one of them. A couple of receivers, Mitchell Tinsley, you know what I mean? He had a really good camp, really good preseason. A lot of people were very excited when he made the initial roster. I want to see him get some burn if possible at the end of the season here. Kaz Allen is a guy, you got a lot of potential there. And again, nothing to really lose. So throw him out, back out there, give him some live reps on some punt returns, give him some live fields, stuff like that. And, he probably is going to muff 1 or 2. He might, lose 1 or 2. But that's part of the growth process. Get him out there, give him some live reps in a regular season game. Tight end Cole Turner. It's a receiving tight end league, but we see less and less of Cole Turner. I understand that the concern there is blocking. And in today's NFL, tight ends have to be able to block. They got to be able to receive just as well, for both. And John Bates does enough receiving things and is much better of a blocker to keep him in the lineup. Logan Thomas, obviously the veteran, but Cole Turner, you got to put him out there again. You got to give him live reps. If you want him to get improved, if you want him to improve in the blocking game, then, blocking pads in practice, blocking other tight ends in practice is fine, but you got to get him out there against these guys. You got to get him out there against these big dudes trying to run him over and just find out how much is he going to fight back. Offensive linemen, I got 3 of them: Mason Brooks, Alex Akingbulu, Nolan Laufenberg. Mason Brooks is a dude that, he was a fan favorite in training camp. A lot of you guys have continued to ask me about him, throughout the season. So I want to see him. Alex Akingbulu has been on this team for a couple years now, practice squad right tackle. So, your right tackle position is not solidified. Just put him out there, get him some live reps. Nolan Laufenberg is a lineman that's kind of been on in multiple spots in the lineup during his time with the team, and right now he's listed as a center. So even if that, you got Tyler Larson, Nick Gates. Tyler's a little bit long in the tooth. Nick Gates didn't really work out the way you wanted him to. Ricky Stromberg is injured, so let's see what Nolan Laufenberg can do in a real game, either at center or at guard. So I like to see those guys come in, get some reps. Speaking of offensive linemen, keeping and replacing, I'm not going to get too much into replacing. Basically, if I don't mention them and they're not super young, so like Mason, Alex, Nolan, would love to see all three of those guys back next year. So, you're not really replacing them, but they're kind of bottom of the roster guys anyway. But as far as keeping guys that are more towards the top of the roster, I would keep center Tyler Larson. Again, right now, he's the only center you have on the roster who has proven to be at least mostly stable. I think you move Nick Gates back to guard. Have that conversation if he's willing to do that and can make that happen. I would keep him along to either compete for that starting job next year or to be a key part of the depth of your offensive line. Sam Cosme is obviously a guy I think you're going to keep. I would keep offensive tackle Charles Leno Jr., that veteran leadership, that veteran ability. Not saying that he's immune to being replaced as far as being a starter. You bring in some competition for him and see if he can maintain his job. If not, see if you want to move him somewhere, right tackle. Move him inside, or at a minimum, just tell him, hey man, be a leader, be a veteran amongst these young guys. And obviously you're going to keep Ricky Stromberg as well. Outside of that, and again, developmental guys like Mason, Alex, and Nolan. I think everybody else is, for the most part, pretty much replaceable at this point in time. If again, you have the right moves made this offseason. So thanks for that question. Next mailbag question. Keith came through. What do you think the Jets should do about Aaron Rodgers? So Keith has kind of like a mixed bag of questions. So this is going to be a lot of fun. What do you think the Jets should do about Aaron Rodgers? So the last report I saw, Aaron Rodgers wants to play. The Jets are eliminated from playoff contention. If I'm the New York Jets, I'm telling A-Rod to shut it down. Like there's no reason to come out here and risk your health. Anything you do in these last 3 games is not going to directly correlate to what happens next season. I know if it's a great 3 games, then we're all going to talk about in the national meetings and spend all offseason talking about how the Jets would have been a Super Bowl contender with them, how he still looks great, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, man, when training camp comes back around, things are going to be new, things are going to be fresh, and things are going to get started. If he does poorly, it's all going to be about, should the Jets go after another quarterback? Is the Zach Wilson thing done? Is A-Rod all over the hill? Should he retire? You know what I mean? It really is just going to bring up a bunch of narratives. The Jets are eliminated from playoff contention. There's really no benefit to the franchise for Aaron Rodgers to come in and ball out, and there's no benefit to the franchise for Aaron Rodgers to come in and either get re-injured or not ball out. So to me, shut it down. A-Rod, we love you. Come back next year. Mike Tomlin leaving the Steelers. Keith thinks that's a good fit for the Washington Commanders. In my opinion, I don't hate the idea of hiring Tomlin if the Steelers fire him, but I'm not trading for him. I also don't hate the idea of hiring Robert Saleh if the Jets fire him. I'm just not trading for him. Brian Flores, defense coordinator in Minnesota, is another option that I'm kind of looking at. And honestly, Bobby Slowick is probably my first-time hire candidate if I'm looking to get a guy first time out of a coordinator position. And then the lastly, Keith asked, which pattern do you believe in most? Picking the quarterback and building around him, or building a good team and plugging a quarterback in? I am a build the team, plug the quarterback in type of guy. The quarterback is the driver of your car, which is why he's considered the most valuable. But unless you bring in a quarterback that can elevate everybody around him, more likely than not, you're getting just a dude that's holding the steering wheel. And if that steering wheel isn't surrounded by really solid parts, it doesn't matter where you drafted him. Doesn't matter how much you pay him. It's not going to work out very well. Very rarely do you get a quarterback that can make the parts around him better. And that's what people are looking for when they go out and draft a quarterback in the top 5, top 1, top 2, even top 10. And just, unfortunately, it's just not how it typically tends to go. So for me, I build the team. I plug the quarterback in. If the quarterback is a truck and can bring everybody up with him, fantastic. If he's not, I've already got a good unit around him, and that makes sure that I'm going to be successful. So that's the route that I would go. Everybody's got their own kind of opinion. As we look to the future, let's try to learn from the past by doing a 2023 NFL redraft. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by GameTime. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your favorite events, and GameTime is the fast and easy way for you to buy tickets to all your sports, music, comedy, and even theater events near you. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. GameTime simply takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They've got last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals. Everything is literally easy for you to buy, and GameTime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. GameTime has deals on tickets right up to the time of the event, and for some of them, even an hour after it starts. It is the place to find last-minute seats. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, Use the promo code Locked On NFL and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Wrapping up this episode of Locked On Commanders, looking at a 2023 NFL redraft. I had plenty, more than a few insiders ask me to do a redraft and kind of revisit what we thought before the draft happened and in the offseason, and just kind of relooking at things that happened since then. So here's how this whole thing broke down. Number one pick for the Washington Commanders, 16th overall pick. I just remember going back to it. Cornerback was certainly a position that was high on a lot of people's boards, but to me, it was a nickel cornerback. It was a slot guy. That's what the Washington Commanders needed. Benjamin St-Juste made a lot of growth in the 2022 season as an outside corner. Even though they started him inside, he ended up moving outside because William Jackson didn't work out, and he and Kendall Fuller made pretty good strides. Derek Forrest was looking really good. Cam Kerr was looking really good. Really like Danny Johnson, but again, he's not really that solidified guy, and obviously now he's not with the team anymore. Unfortunately, but I wanted to see competition brought into that slot position. Cornerback Deonte Banks out of Maryland would have brought that competition in. You put him right there with Danny, and you just tell those guys, the best man's going to win this job. Go prove that you're the best man. There's no cross training. There's no maybe he's a safety, maybe he's a corner. There's none of this crap. And when they went with a perimeter corner, it was just a pretty clear sign that obviously they looked at Benjamin St-Juste as still their slot guy. I disagreed with the opinion that decision then. I obviously disagree with it now. Benjamin St-Juste, if he gets to focus on just being an outside corner like he did for most of the season last season, continue to build on the good things he did, I think he's an even better perimeter corner this year. And we wouldn't be necessarily in the position we are now. So, and I'm not completely sold. Again, this is just my opinion. This isn't coming from any source information. I'm not completely sold, guys, that drafting DBs in your first and second round picks didn't just completely tank the chemistry inside the secondary. Not from like hating Emmanuel, hating Quan, but the secondary is one of the most improved units last year on this team. And then you spend your first two draft picks looking to replace guys. So to me, I think that might have kind of broken some trust that those guys had with Jack and with Ron, and could have potentially caused some of the disruption that we've seen this season. Again, that's not sourced information. That's just kind of my observation as an outsider, but it is what it is. So again, I don't go Emmanuel Forbes. I go Deonte Banks, cornerback out of Maryland. Second round pick, number 17 overall. I go offensive tackle Cody Mauch. Now, he's listed as an offensive tackle in the draft out of North Dakota State, but he's started 14 games so far this season at right guard for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, would have been a left guard for the Washington Commanders, and also he's played 100% of Tampa snaps this season. There's no guarantee that his health in Tampa becomes his health in Washington, but Cody Mauch, if you remember the draft process every day, he was a guy that I was really in love with, saw him at the Senior Bowl, fell even more in love with him. Certainly would have loved to see the Washington Commanders get their hands on him, and given some of the offensive line issues, I don't think he would have necessarily, he's still a rookie, right? He's still got some of his flaws, but certainly wouldn't have been any worse. Third round, 97th overall pick. I'm sticking with center Ricky Stromberg. I think that's a really good pick. I think that, it's unfortunate because, again, like I mentioned before, you want your first 5 rounds worth of picks to be immediate contributors, but I also added in there or competitors or key depth. And the offensive line is key position. And Ricky Stromberg, unfortunately, due to the injury loss for the season. But, I feel like what you saw from him before that was very, very solid for a third round offensive lineman, interior offensive lineman. So we go 2 interior offensive linemen. Cody Mauch potentially could kick out to tackle with that versatility if you need him to, but I like him interior anyway. And again, with the addition of Andrew Wiley, return of Charles Leno, this team was never replacing their starting tackles in the first place. Fourth round pick, 124. I'm going edge Tavius Robinson out of Mississippi. I like KJ Henry. I like what Andre Jones Jr. has been able to do in limited play, but I think you needed a better option. You needed a higher pick to really start fully developing. I mean, to me, entering the season every day, as you remember, I kind of came in with the opinion that you're not signing both Chase Young and Montez Sweat. You're signing one or the other. Potentially, if you don't sign both, I would have kept Montez. It is what it is. And then edge Tavius Robinson comes in a 4th round pick. He's a rotational guy. You start developing some of that talent. Maybe he proves to you that you don't need a 1st or 2nd round edge rusher. Next year, you re-sign Tez and you kind of reset your defensive line that way. 5th round, 137. I go linebacker Noah Sewell out of Oregon. He's been injured, banged up with the Chicago Bears, but I do know that he was looking very impressive as a weak side linebacker in their 4-3 scheme before the season started. You come in, you give some more depth behind Jamin Davis, and you're honestly, it's kind of a warning shot to Jamin. Dude, we will replace you with a 5th-round pick if you don't act right. 6th-round pick, 193, Chris Rodriguez Jr. I'm keeping him, so we're staying par there. 7th-round pick, 233. I'm going safety Anthony Johnson Jr. out of Iowa State. Again, Defoe, Cam Curl, really solid pieces. Percy Butler, you really like the potential that he had coming in. Jeremy Reeves, obviously you love the energy that he brings in there. Add another guy, Anthony Johnson Jr. behind them to develop, learn, grow, give you a little bit of a safety net if Cam Curl doesn't return. So that is my Washington Commanders 2023 redraft. We go corner, edge, linebacker, safety. Corner, edge, linebacker, safety with 4 of the picks. We go interior offensive line, offensive lineman, and we go running back with the other 3 picks. And that's the way that I think that we could have done it, or we could have done it. Washington could have done it. Looking back on it, but again, hindsight is 2020, of course. So unfortunately, we don't get that benefit. However, obviously, the Washington Commanders are eliminated from playoff contention. So now the focus is on developing and identifying pieces you want to keep moving forward, and also maintaining draft capital. Coming up tomorrow, Locked On Jets coming through, crossover Thursday. 2 teams that are looking at draft capital more than they're looking at winning the rest of the season. So it should be an interesting conversation. In the meantime, if you got questions, throw them in the YouTube comment section or text me directly by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Don't forget that Locked On has also launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts and national shows. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Thank you again for making me a part of your day, part of your routine. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.